Right, guys. Hey, 255. Corfy? I'm not too sure. But the key point here is that we're looking at fixed and flexible budgets. So some number work here, but not a mixture of some written work as well. So let's, again, I'm sure you've read it, so let's dive right in. We have a scenario where we have a flexible budget. We have basically these variable costs happening here, and then we have these units kind of happening, and then we are told what the maximum production capacity is, and then we're really playing around with this movement. We're also given some additional information that for every 50,000 units we will need a supervisor. So pretty much, but that's not included in this. It says in addition to the above, so that's not included in here. So let's jump right in, and I'm sure you've had a go, so that you're just really comparing your answers to mine. And so it says that assuming the budgeted figures are correct, what are the flex total production costs if we're 80% of maximum capacity? So 80%, that's maximum capacity. So what's the scenario? We know these are variable, so 80% of that. So let's go to my spreadsheet. So what I've done is I've come up here and I've sort of put my figures in, my first set of figures, which are actually those, that thing there, that thing there, and that thing there. And I tested, first of all, just to see what the variable cost of material was. So you can see here that if you're spending 740,000 on these units, you're spending £4 per unit of material. And it worked out exactly the same thing here, 80,000 divided by 20,000, the same thing. So I could tell straight away that the variable cost of material is 4, and I did exactly the same thing for labor by dividing the labor cost by the number of production units, and I had 5.5. So I could see straight away, okay, that's variable and that's fixed. Brilliant. Now, it asks me to look at 80% of total output, which is 80% of the 262,500, which is the 210,000. So I'm like, okay, great. So now I know that's what I'm interested in, this sort of area here. So the question here is, I literally applied the £4 to these number of units to get the material, applied the labor to these number of units, and those are the fixed costs. Now the question about the supervisor, what I said was, well, if I need 50,000 for every if I need a supervisor for every 50,000 units to make 210,000 units, well, I would need, if you like, 210,000 divided by 50,000, right? So that's 4.2. So technically I need to round that up because I need 5 supervisors, right? Because it's for every 50,000 units. So once you get to whatever 200,000, you're at 4. And once you cross that, you need an extra one, so it's 5. So therefore they tell us the salary of them, and they tell us it's £35,000 each. So you need 35,000 times 5, so you have 175,000. And so it means, therefore, that your total cost, of course, becomes, I'm just going to do this, 2.92 million. So if you go there, if you go to your answer sheet, if you go to your question bank and you look at the questions, you will see that you will have your situation here. That's it. So that one is D. Question 2 was somewhat long-winded, and I thought a bit cheeky because they didn't really give you, I mean, I guess I worked it out, but I kind of thought when you see this type of thing here, you're starting to think, okay, how do I find, right? So let's see the situation. It says here that we're going to need some machine work done, and it's 1,000. For every 1,000 units, we need 14 hours. Okay, so your first step, I'm just going to go to sort of blank screen here. Your first step is, okay, 1,000 hours, 1,000 hours, and 1,000 units is 14 hours. So you're thinking, well, I know how many units I need to produce here. I'm producing 210,000 units. So in effect, the question is, how many hours do you need? And that's technically right, 210 times 14. I'm just making it short. And so 210 times 14 gives us 2,940. 2,940. So you need 2,940 hours. So the question then becomes, well, how do I work out the maintenance cost? And you can see here that there must be some, the way the costs look, you can sort of sense that you can test it and see if it's variable. If it was purely variable, you should be able to divide maintenance costs by the machine hours and get the same figure every time, right? You should be able to say 850,000 over 5,000 hours and get the same thing as 735 over 4,400 hours, right? I just put the extra zeros. It should work if it was all variable, but it isn't, because when you try it, it isn't equal. So it means there must be a fixed element here. That's the way of knowing. You almost have to trial and error yourself to see, are these variable or are these all fixed? And in effect, when you do that, you will realize there's actually a fixed element. So the question is, how do I find what that is? So we need to sort of use the high-low method, pretty much. Well, that's one way to do it. You could use simultaneous equations, but same idea. So what are we saying here? So you have 450 here, and you have 850 here, and you have here 1,800, and you have here 5,000. So the high-low method is literally saying to me 5,000 minus 1,800 divided by 850 minus 450. And here we have 5,000 minus 1,800. So we have 3,200 here divided by 850 minus 450, which gives us 400. We divide these two things together. 3,200 divided by 400. No, sorry, I've made a mistake, because that's not what I've made a mistake. It's the other way around. Forgive me. So easy to do. These are my hours here. My hours are here. So my hours are, because that's what the question is. What's the cost increasing per hour? That's what I'm trying to find. So I'm just going to do this here. So easy to do, so easy to mistake to make here. So here I have 1,800 hours, and here I have 5,000 hours, and here for 1,800 you have costs of £450,000, and here you have costs of £850,000. So really I'm swapping this, so I'm basically having 400,000 divided by 3,200 hours, right? That's what I have here for, actually, sorry, yes, 400,000. So 400,000 divided by 3,200 hours. I still feel I've done this. I'm making an error here. Something is wrong with my mathematics. Let me just check carefully. Maintenance costs 850,000, yes, minus 450,000. 850 minus 450 is 400,000. That's correct. And in terms of my hours, 5,000 minus yes, that's correct. It's 5,000 minus 1,800 is 3,200. So this is correct. So 400,000 divided by 3,200. 400,000 divided by 3,200 gives us 125. So we're saying the variable cost, in effect, is 125. There we are, 1,200. Why am I feeling that I'm still somewhat wrong here? Bear with me. Here we are. Yes, it is 125. The number just looked very huge to me. 125. That's the answer. So that's your variable. That's your variable cost. That's your variable movement, if you like. So, I mean, all I literally do is apply this in any of these equations. I'll just take the first one, for example, to test it. So what I'm saying here is we have a total cost of 450,000. And basically, this is equal to a fixed cost element plus this £125 times the 1,800 hours, if you like. And that takes us to 125 times 1,800 gives us 225. which means that the fixed cost element is 450 minus 225, which is 225,000. So the fixed cost is 225. We can test this in another one. We can look at the 5,000, the year one, where we have, if you like, maintenance cost of 850,000. It should work. That's the whole way of testing this, is equal to fixed cost plus 125 times 5,000 hours. So we have 125 times 5,000, which is 625. This is 625, and when we take this away from 8,500, again we have 225. So we're very clear as to what the fixed costs are. The fixed costs are 225. That's perfect, because all I have to do now is say, well, for my 2,940 hours, I know what the variable cost is, which is 125. So multiply the 125 times the 2,940 hours, which brings us to 367,500. Add these two together, because there's a fixed element, and that's the variable element, 225000, and you have 592,500. And by the time you round this up, you have 593,000. And that's that, and that takes you to B. The answer to 2 becomes B. Apologies about that. Sometimes when I'm using my calculator, in my head, the number just looked bigger to me. I felt I was not doing my maths correct. But the key point is we need to use the high-low method, right? And of course, this is always output, and this is always cost, so be careful in my rush. Okay, great. Then let's look. Now we can go back to now we had just written bits. We just have written bits. So let's go to that and see what the question is saying here. Right. So we have, yes, so let's carry on here. So it says, in the first month of production, actual sales were 18,000. And the sales revenue achieved was 702. The budgeted sales unit was 17,300. So the key issue here is, the question here is, which is true? Once the budget is flexed, the key point is, once the budget is flexed, we are working to actual sales, right? The whole idea of budgeted sales is irrelevant in flexing a budget. This is very different to analyzing the what's going on with sales. If you will, because once you flex a budget, we're saying we want to see what's happening at actual output, right? Because really the focus is on production. Flexing a budget really is to do with production. If you analyze a flexed budget, if you analyze sales based on a flexed budget, well, you've totally eliminated the issue of volume, because you're not actually comparing the budgeted sales unit to the actual sales unit, to the actual sales. If you want to analyze sales, well, you're not going to flex the budget, because ultimately you're going to be comparing what we thought we were going to sell with what we actually sold, and ask the question. So once you flex the budget, what you do straight away is you eliminate the volume variance, and only the pricing variance, the sales price variance, actually arises. So it's an interesting question. I think it's an applied question. They want to see if you truly understand the meaning of flexing a budget, right? Remember, with flexing a budget, we are working to the actual number of units. We want to see what was the activity at the actual number of units. So the answer is C. The answer is C. Question 4. Where are we? Here we are. Question 4. So, which of the following statements are true relating to a flexible budget? So I think these are one of those that you almost have to kind of read carefully. They almost all look quite fair, but then you have to almost focus. I'm going to start with the bottom one. The budget will encourage all activities and the values of the organization to be reviewed and assessed. This has the characteristics of, really, if you remember when we talked about zero-based budgeting, that's what's really happening here. And a flexible budget isn't really... A flexible budget is basically just looking at the different activity levels. We're not really analyzing what's going on with all the activities. You understand? All we're saying is what happens, exactly what we did here. All we're saying is what's happening on all these different activity levels. So it's not really kind of going in to do any real critical analysis or review and assess. So no. The flexible budget will give managers more opportunities to include slack. No, not true, really. if you like, in a way, it's just a standard. There's no slack. We're not increasing anything. Slack is being able to put in additional costs that aren't there. So we don't have that issue with this with flexible budgets. The issues we do have, though, is that over certain outputs, it is interesting to sort of assume, you're making assumptions that variable, first of all, you're ignoring the learning process, the fact that variable costs are actually falling as you increase, and that costs start to increase maybe due to diseconomies of scale. So there's an issue there. And then the budget could be time consuming to produce splitting out semi-variables, may not be straightforward. So the truth is that 1 and 2 are your strongest options here in terms of understanding the behavior of costs. And I think that's really the issue here. So it does, in a way, these written ones, just because they're written, may seem easier, but you do have to kind of focus in a little and keep practicing them and rereading those chapters on budgeting. Just make sure you're able to separate, because what they do is, it's not that what they do is they mix in different topics. This is zero-based budgeting, fundamentally. And you just want to see if you can tease out the meanings of these issues. Alright, so the answer there was A. And then finally, question 5. I thought this was a fair one, quite fair. In terms of using spreadsheets, you can change things quickly, right? Can't you? And quickly produce. Errors are not easy to trace. If you know anything about Excel, I'm sure you do. And if you like, it's very easy to corrupt data, so 2 is not correct. A spreadsheet will never be able to take account of qualitative factors, and you can carry out sensitivity analysis, so naturally the answer is C here. Again, remember, it's an exam. Your aim is not to worry too much about, you do the ones you know, and then come back and make sure you have time for the ones you don't know. It's about being strategic to kill off what you know quickly as possible, and some there are just there for the taking. Okay, great stuff. See you in the next question.